The ship tilts 30 degrees before anyone starts screaming. I'm 3 decks down when the first impact hits, a grinding shriek of metal on rock that runs through the floor and into my teeth. The lights flicker once, twice, then die. Emergency strips glow red along the corridor. Water is already hissing somewhere below me. Reef. We hit a reef in the middle of a storm nobody predicted. I could run for the lifeboats. Everyone else is running for the lifeboats. Instead, I turn back toward the cabin corridor because I heard someone pounding on a door that won't open, and my body decides before my brain does. Cabin 214. The door is jammed against a buckled frame. Behind it, a girl is screaming in a way that isn't panic anymore. It's the sound of someone who's already given up. I put my shoulder into the door twice. Third time it gives. She's maybe 20, expensive clothes soaked through, ankle pinned under a fallen shelf. Rich kid jewelry, the kind that costs more than my old apartment. Move your foot when I lift, I say. No time for names. She doesn't move it. She's frozen, staring at the water rising past her knees. Now, I say, and lift the shelf myself, and she finally drags her foot free and I drag her the rest of the way out. The corridor is at a worse angle than before. I get her to the stairwell, hand her off to a crew member shouting about Lifeboat 6, and I don't wait to see if she makes it. I go back down. 2 more doors. One opens on a woman about my age, calm, already moving, who just needs someone to confirm which way is up in a hallway that stopped making sense. I point, she goes. The last door sticks worse than the first. I have to kick it twice, and inside is a girl curled against the wall, not screaming at all, just staring at nothing while water pools around her ankles. Shock does that. Some people scream. Some people go quiet and stop deciding things. We're leaving, I tell her, and pull her up by the arm, and she comes without a word, like a puppet with the strings cut and someone else holding them now. By the time we reach open deck, the ship is listing hard enough that walking means grabbing rails every few steps. Rain comes sideways. I lose sight of the first girl in the crowd around the lifeboats. Too many people, not enough room. Someone's already fighting over a seat. There's no seat left for the 3 of us. I grab a section of railing that's already torn loose, drag it toward the 2 girls still with me, and we go over the side together. Because staying on a sinking ship waiting for a boat that isn't coming is not a plan. The ocean is worse than I expected. Worse than anything I expected. I don't remember most of the swim. I remember the girl with the ankle injury surfacing near us at some point, grabbing the same piece of railing, the 3 of us clinging to scrap metal in water too dark and too loud to think in. I remember a wave that felt like a wall. I remember deciding, somewhere in the middle of it, that letting go was not an option I was willing to consider, and that deciding things helps more than panicking does. Then sand. Actual sand, under my knees, and I'm crawling up a beach in the last gray light before full dark, and 2 of the 3 girls are crawling beside me, and I count heads and there are only 2. Where's... My voice comes out wrecked. She was right behind me, says the calm one. Brown hair plastered flat, arms shaking from exhaustion, not fear. She had the railing too. I go back into the surf. Not far. I can't go far, my legs are done. But far enough to grab a shape rolling in the shallows that turns out to be the 3rd girl. Unconscious. Alive. Coughing up water the second I get her onto dry sand. 3 for 3, barely. We lie on the beach for a long time. Nobody talks. The storm keeps going somewhere out past the reef, thunder rolling, but the worst of the rain has moved off, leaving a thin drizzle that doesn't matter anymore because we're already soaked to the bone. Full dark. No fire, no shelter, no idea where we are. I get names out of them in pieces, between coughing fits and shivering. The rich one is May. She's stopped shaking from fear and started shaking from cold, which I take as a good sign. Cold means her brain's caught up to the situation. The calm one is Ira. She's already on her feet, walking the tree line, looking for anything useful, moving like someone who processes fear by doing something with her hands. The quiet one is Yuna. She hasn't said more than her name. She sits with her knees pulled to her chest and watches the water like it might come back for her specifically. We need fire, Ira says, crouching next to me. And we need it now, not in an hour. She's right. Wet clothes, no shelter, tropical night. Hypothermia doesn't care that we survived a shipwreck. I start looking for dry tinder under the tree line, which is a joke, because everything on this island got rained on for the last 6 hours. I find a fallen branch anyway, snap it, and the inside is dry enough. Bark curls, dead palm fronds tucked under the canopy where the worst of the rain didn't reach. That's when something in my head changes. It's not a sound. It's not a light. It's more like a shelf sliding into place somewhere behind my eyes. A sense that I'm holding more than just a stick. That the stick has a weight and a shape, and a use that I can feel without looking at it. Words that aren't words, more like knowing, settle into place. Workshop interface. Initialized. Raw material detected. Wood low quality. Crafting. Available. Tire 1. Woodworking. I stand very still, holding a wet branch, while my brain tries to decide if the shipwreck broke something in it. You okay? Era asks. Give me a second. I look at the branch again, and this time I don't just see wood. I see numbers, quiet and small at the edge of my vision, telling me what it's worth and what it could become. I think, half as a joke to myself, about a spear point. The branch reshapes. Not fast, not free. It takes maybe 30 seconds, and I feel it costs something. A small drain like using a muscle I didn't know I had. But when it's done, the end of the branch is sharpened clean. Straighter than my hands could ever cut it, edges smooth like it went through a lathe instead of a shipwreck survivor's panic. May makes a sound like a hiccup. What did you just do? I don't know yet, I say, which is honest. I don't try to explain the shelf in my head to 3 strangers I met an hour ago while half drowned. I just start using it because a working spear point in my hand is more useful right now than an explanation. Fire comes together fast once I stop wasting time being confused. Dry tinder from under the canopy. A firebow I don't even remember deciding to shape until it's already sharpened and balanced in my hands, sparks that catch on the 3rd try. The flame is small and ugly and exactly what we need. Ira builds the fire up with more branches while I explain, badly in short pieces because I don't have the full picture myself, that something in my head is letting me shape raw material into tools, and that it seems to want more raw material to do more with. So it's like a system, Era says, testing the word. Sure, a system. May's teeth are still chattering, but she's watching the fire with a different kind of attention now. Less shock, more calculation. The first flicker of the person she'll turn out to be under the expensive clothes. Yuna hasn't moved from her spot, knees to her chest, eyes on the dark tree line instead of the fire. We build a lean-to before full exhaustion takes us. Nothing elegant. Palm fronds and driftwood lashed with vine I strip and twist by hand. The workshop shelf in my head confirming the knot holds before I even finish tying it. It's not much. It's enough to get 3 soaked, shaking people out of the wind. Somewhere around midnight, something moves in the brush past the fire. Not loud. A shift in the leaves that's wrong for wind, followed by silence that's wrong for an empty island. Ira goes still first, then May, then even Yuna lifts her head. I don't have a weapon that could stop anything bigger than a rabbit, and I know it. Running isn't an option. 3 exhausted people. One of them barely able to stand, against whatever's out there in the dark. So I don't run and I don't fight. I set a trap. Vine cut fast, looped low across the gap in the brush where the sound came from, tied to a bent sapling under tension. Crude, ugly. 30 seconds of work fueled entirely by adrenaline and the workshop telling me quietly that the knot will hold. The shape comes through the gap a few minutes later. Something low and fast, more shadow than animal in the firelight, and it hits the vine at full speed. The sapling snaps upright. Whatever it is goes down hard, thrashing, tangled, and in the chaos of that it decides the fire and the 4 screaming humans near it aren't worth the trouble. It tears free and vanishes back into the dark, leaving fur and a smear of something dark on the vine. Nobody sleeps well after that. But nobody dies either, and by the pale gray of almost dawn, all 4 of us are still breathing, which feels like a bigger victory than it should. Morning brings enough light to actually see the beach we crawled onto. It's long, curved, backed by dense jungle that climbs into hills further inland. No boats, no wreckage beyond a few scattered pieces the tide dragged in overnight, a section of railing, a life vest, splinters of decking. No sign of the ship at all past the reef line, which means it's gone under completely. I walk the tide line while the others sleep in the lean-to, partly to think, partly because standing still lets the fear catch up to me and I'd rather not sit with it yet. That's when I find the fragment. It's metal, half buried in wet sand, about the size of my palm, dark and pitted like it's been in salt water for years rather than hours. Nothing about it matches the ship. No paint, no manufacturer stamp, no rivets in the pattern I saw on the lifeboats. When I brush the sand off, there are marks across the surface. Not corrosion. Lines, deliberate, cut in a pattern that doesn't belong to anything I recognize. The workshop shelf in my head flickers when I pick it up. A small pulse of interest, like it wants to tell me something about the fragment and doesn't have enough information yet. I turn it over once, twice, then slide it into my pocket, because whatever it is, it didn't come from the ship, and this island was supposed to be empty. Behind me, I hear Era's voice, rough with sleep, asking if I found anything useful. Yeah, I say, and I'm not lying. I think I did. The fragment stays in my pocket through breakfast, which is nothing. A few pieces of something Era found growing near the tree line that she swears is edible. Eaten in silence while everyone's stomach makes it clear that swearing isn't the same as proving. I pull the fragment out once, turn it over in the light. The marks catch differently in daylight. Deliberate lines, not damage. Whatever it is, it's not going to explain itself before I've dealt with the four of us not dying today. I put it away. We need water, Era says. She's already standing, already moving, the kind of person who turns fear into a checklist. And better shelter than a pile of palm leaves. May, sitting a careful distance from everyone with her ruined dress dried stiff and cracked, doesn't look up. There's no water. We're on a beach. There's rain, Era says, and there's probably a stream inland because there's jungle, and jungle needs fresh water same as we do. Yuna says nothing. She hasn't said much since last night, just watches whoever's talking, present but somewhere behind her own eyes. I decide the debris on the beach first, water second. If the ocean is going to keep handing us pieces of the wreck, I want to know what those pieces are worth before the tide takes them back. There's more wreckage than I expected once I actually walk the tide line in full light. A length of pipe, half buried. A torn section of decking, still bolted to a chunk of frame. Cable, coiled and half melted at one end. None of it looks like anything on its own. Scrap, garbage, the kind of thing you'd step over. I pick up the pipe first. The shelf in my head, the workshop, since apparently that's what it's calling itself, responds the way it did with the branch last night. A weight to the object that isn't just its physical weight. Options, quiet at the edge of thought. Break down, metal salvaged, rubber salvaged, plastic trace. I think the word break down at it, mostly out of curiosity, and the pipe doesn't explode or dissolve. It just separates cleanly, like it was three different things clamped together that finally remembered they were never one piece to begin with. A short length of metal, a ring of rubber gasket, a sliver of plastic housing barely enough to matter. Aira, watching over my shoulder, goes very quiet. That pipe didn't come apart like that on its own, she says. No. Do it again. I do it again, with the cable this time, and get a length of stripped copper wire and a coil of rubber insulation, separated as cleanly as if I'd spent an hour with the right tools instead of no tools at all. Aira crouches down next to the small pile of separated materials, turning the copper wire over in her fingers with the focus of someone who studied this exact kind of thing before a storm rewrote her life. I was 2 years into an engineering program, she says, not quite to me. This is, I don't know what this is, but it's not nothing. Woodworking, Tier 1, unlocked, category progression available, metalworking, mechanics, chemistry, electrical, advanced engineering. The words settle into place behind my eyes the same way they did last night, except this time there's more of them. A structure, tiers I can't reach yet. Locked behind something the workshop calls progress. I don't have the full shape of it. I have enough to know that last night wasn't a fluke, and that whatever this is, it wants to grow. May finally gets up to look at the pile of scrap, arms crossed, unconvinced. So you can turn junk into more junk. Great. Still no water. Working on it, I say. I take stock of what the workshop actually offers me right now at Tier 1. Wood. Basic shaping. Nothing that builds a water source out of nothing. The system doesn't create matter. It only reshapes what I feed it, which means the fastest path to water is still doing it the hard way. Catching rain, finding a stream, boiling if it comes to that. But shelter I can do something about immediately. I spend the next stretch of the morning cutting saplings with a blade I shape from a fire-hardened branch. The workshop confirming angles and joints before I even finish cutting them. Like it already knows the shape a wall needs to hold weight and is just waiting for me to catch up. Palm fronds woven tighter than anything we managed last night. A frame lashed with vine, corners braced instead of just tied, a slight pitch to the roof so rain runs off instead of pooling. It takes most of the morning. By early afternoon, there's a shelter standing on the beach that looks less like driftwood and more like something a person built on purpose. May stares at it for a long moment. You built that in a few hours. Yeah. With sticks. With sticks and a system in my head that I don't fully understand either, I say. Get in before it rains again and test it with me. It rains hard that afternoon. The tail end of the storm system finally passing through, sheets of it coming sideways for almost an hour. All four of us crowd under the new shelter and it holds. Water runs off the pitched roof instead of coming through it. The frame doesn't shift. Outside, what's left of last night's lean-to collapses flat under the weight of the rain within the first 10 minutes. May watches the collapse happen from the dry side of the new shelter and doesn't say anything sarcastic this time, which from her is its own kind of statement. I didn't think it would hold, she admits, quiet enough that I almost miss it. Neither did I, honestly. The workshop did the math. I just cut where it told me to. Yuna sits at the back of the shelter, knees still pulled to her chest, but she's watching the rain run off the roof instead of watching nothing. Small thing. I notice it anyway. The rain breaks by evening, leaving standing water in every dip in the sand and a network of small streams running down from higher ground toward the beach, which solves the water problem faster than I expected, though not permanently. Rainwater collected now as rainwater will run out of the moment the sky clears for more than a day. We collect what we can in the 2 intact bottles that washed up with the wreckage, and I set snares along a game trail era spots cutting through the tree line. Thin cord from stripped vine. Tension the workshop confirms will hold before I even finish tying the knot, same as everything else today. It's not much. It's a start. We need real water, Era says, looking inland at the hills. Not puddles. A stream. Something we can come back to every day without hoping for rain. Tomorrow, I say. Today already cost more than I have left in me. Legs from the swim, hands from cutting and lashing all afternoon, and something else. A duller ache I don't have a word for yet that seems tied to how much I've been asking the workshop to do. We push inland at first light. Tonight, we hold this spot. May doesn't argue, which after this morning feels like a small miracle. Era nods, already turning her attention to checking the snare lines one more time before dark. Yuna doesn't say anything, but she's the one who ends up sitting closest to the shelter's entrance that night, like she's decided without saying so that this spot is worth defending. Full dark again, and this time there's no wandering shape in the brush, no vine traps snapping tight around something unseen. Just 4 people under a shelter that held through a storm, a small fire built from wood the workshop helped me split cleanly, and a quiet that feels different from last night's, less like survival, more like the first thin thread of something that might eventually become a life here. I take the fragment out of my pocket again before I let myself sleep, turning it over near the firelight. Still no answers. Still those deliberate lines that don't match anything I recognize. The workshop gives me the same faint pulse of unformed interest it gave me this morning. Enough to tell me it matters. Not enough to tell me why. Somewhere behind that pulse, further back than the tears I can already see, there's a shape I can't quite make out yet. Categories locked, waiting on progress. I don't know how to earn on purpose, only stumble into by doing what needs doing. I put the fragment away and lie back against the shelter frame I built with my own hands out of sticks and a voice in my head that started talking to me during a shipwreck. Tomorrow, water. Real water, not puddles. Tonight, for the first time since the ship went down, I actually sleep. We push inland at first light, following the network of small streams uphill until they converge into something wider. Not a river, but close enough. Clear water running over a bed of stone, deep enough in places to actually wash the salt out of our clothes. Ira drops to her knees at the bank and just sits there for a second, hands in the current. Okay, she says. Okay, this changes everything. It does. A water source we don't have to hope the sky provides is the difference between surviving and starting to build something. We follow the stream a short way further and find the second thing that changes everything. A cut bank where the water's carved into the hillside, exposing a pale gray seam under the topsoil. I don't need the workshop to tell me what it is, but it tells me anyway, the way it started doing with anything I focus on for more than a few seconds. Material detected. Clay workable. Further up, past a fall of loose rock, a shelf of stone breaks the surface. Flat-topped, easy to work, more of it buried under a thin layer of soil that peels back with a few minutes of digging. Clay and stone in the same afternoon, Era says, already crouched at the seam, working a handful loose between her fingers to test it. You know what this means, right? Bricks, I say. A real house instead of sticks. Category unlocked. Basic ceramics. Category unlocked. Stone masonry. The shelf behind my eyes shifts to make room for both. Options I couldn't reach yesterday, now sitting there waiting on raw material and time. We spend 2 days hauling clay and stone down to the beach site because the flat ground near the water is better for building than the uneven slope by the stream. It's slow work. Clay in wet lumps wrapped in palm leaves, stone dragged on a crude sledge I shaped from driftwood. Everyone's hands raw by the end of the first day. May complains about the second thing before the first hour is even over. My hands are bleeding, she announces, holding up 2 palms that are, in fairness, actually bleeding a little. Wrap them in cloth and keep going, Era says, not looking up from the sledge she's helping drag. Or don't, and explain to Dan later why the stone's only half moved. May glares at her, wraps her hands in a strip torn from the hem of her ruined dress, and keeps going, muttering the whole time. By the second evening, we have enough stone and clay stacked near the shelter to actually start, and I spend that night shaping the first real walls, not sticks lashed together, but stone set and clay packed between the gaps, The workshop confirming load points before I set each piece, the way it's confirmed knots and angles since day one. It's slow. It's real. By the time exhaustion catches up to me, there's a low wall standing that wasn't there this morning. The house grows over the following days into something with actual rooms. Small ones, rough ones, but rooms, with a hearth built from stacked stone and clay mortar that the workshop assures me won't crack under fire before it's even fired for the first time. That's when the argument happens. It starts small. May walks the half-finished house, inspecting, and stops at the corner room, the one with a gap in the wall where I've left space for a window, because even a rough house deserves light. "This one's mine," she announces. "Says who?" Era says, not even looking up from where she's testing the mortar mix. Says the person who almost drowned twice and has been living on a beach for a week without so much as a proper wall around her. "We've all been living on a beach for a week," Era says. "Some of us have also been hauling stone instead of complaining about our hands." May's jaw sets. "I helped haul stone." "You hauled stone for 40 minutes and then decided your hands needed a rest for the rest of the afternoon. It's not a huge fight. Nobody's yelling. But there's an edge to it that wasn't there yesterday." May's pride against Era's practicality. Both of them a little too tired and a little too aware that this island is starting to feel less temporary. Which means things like whose room is whose suddenly matter in a way they didn't on the first night. Yuna, sitting near the hearth with a bundle of drying reeds she's been quietly weaving into mats, doesn't say anything at all. She doesn't ask for a room. She doesn't argue for one. She just keeps weaving, present but out of the fight entirely. And something about that, the not asking, makes the decision for me before I've consciously made it. "Yuna gets the corner room," I say. Both of them turn to look at me. "She hasn't asked for anything since the ship went down," I say. "That's worth something." May opens her mouth to argue, closes it again, and settles for a long look at Yuna that isn't quite resentment and isn't quite acceptance either. Ira just nods once, like it confirms something she already suspected about how this is all going to work. Yuna herself just looks up from the reeds, startled, like she wasn't expecting to be the one anyone thought about at all. The well comes next, once the house has 4 standing walls and a roof that holds. We find a spot close enough to the stream to dig without hitting dry ground, and the workshop offers something new when I focus on the problem of getting water up without hauling every bucket by hand. Design available, hand pump basic. Materials required, metal components, wood housing. The workshop doesn't hand me a finished pump. It gives me pieces, a cylinder shaped from the metal I salvaged and broke down days ago, a valve seated from scrap rubber, a wooden housing I have to cut and fit and assemble myself, joint by joint, with the workshop only confirming whether each piece is shaped correctly before I move to the next. It takes the better part of a day. By the end of it, the pump handle creaks, resists, and then gives, and water comes up clean and cold from below ground. No bucket, no trip to the stream. Ira actually laughs, a short surprise sound, and pumps the handle a second time just to watch the water come again. "You built a well pump on a deserted island? Out of a shipwreck and a stick?" "The workshop built the pieces," I say. "I put them together." Same thing, at this point. That evening, with the house standing and the well working and the argument over Yuna's room already fading into the kind of thing that'll come up again in smaller forms but isn't a real fracture yet, I take stock of where the progress sits. The resource the workshop's been quietly tracking since that first branch on the beach. Progress. 40. Ceramics Tier 2 available. Cost 30. Weapon upgrade available. Cost 35. 40 points. Enough for one or the other, not both, and nothing left over worth mentioning either way. The weapon upgrade would mean something sharper than fire-hardened wood, something that actually stands a chance against whatever put teeth marks in last night's. No, that was days ago now. But the memory of that shape hitting the vine trap hasn't faded. Ceramics Tier 2 means real cookware, real storage, jars that seal, the kind of thing that turns surviving into living for 4 people who are going to be here for longer than any of us want to admit. I sit with it for a while, water pump creaking softly in the dark as Ira tests it one more time before bed. May's voice drifting from the new house arguing with nobody in particular about wall placement, Yuna's reeds rustling as she weaves by firelight. Nothing's attacked us since that first night. The trap held. Maybe it'll hold again. I put the progress into ceramics. We'll figure out weapons later, I say, mostly to myself, watching the numbers shift behind my eyes as Tier 2 unlocks. Right now, I'd rather we ate something that isn't half raw. It's a bet. I know it's a bet the moment I make it. Comfort over safety, long-term over immediate. But the island's been quiet. The house is standing, and for the first time since the ship went down, it feels like there might actually be a tomorrow worth building toward. Ceramics Tier 2, unlocked. Behind me, the fire burns low and steady, 4 people under one real roof for the first time since this all started. The garden starts as a patch of cleared dirt behind the house. Seeds saved from whatever fruit Era's identified as safe over the past week. Planted in rows because Era insists rows make weeding easier, and I have no argument against someone who spent 2 years studying things I never learned. The workshop offers something the first morning I kneel over the planted rows, more out of habit than expectation at this point. Process available. Seed cultivation, wild to domesticated. Estimated time, extended, not instant, not even fast. The workshop shows me what a domesticated version of the fruit could look like. Bigger, more reliable, less bitter, but getting there means generations of the plant actually growing, not a snap of fingers. I feed a little progress into starting the process anyway, because eventually better food beats no plan for food at all, and then I leave it alone to do what it does on its own time. So it's not instant, May says, watching me straighten up from the dirt. She's wearing an old shirt from the wreckage now instead of the ruined dress, sleeves rolled, dirt under her fingernails that she hasn't complained about in 2 days. I thought the whole point of the system was that it just gives you things. It gives me options, I say, not shortcuts. Feels like everything real still takes time. She doesn't argue. She's stopped arguing about most things lately, which is its own kind of change from the girl who fought Era over a bedroom 4 days ago. Clean water solved the thirst problem. It didn't solve the getting sick problem, which becomes obvious the day Yuna spends half the morning doubled over near the tree line after drinking straight from a stagnant pool during a supply run, because the stream was further than she wanted to walk that morning. She doesn't complain. She just goes pale and quiet in a way that's worse than complaining, and I decide on the spot that stream water alone isn't good enough anymore. Not with 4 of us relying on it. Not when a bad pool could put someone down for days on an island with no doctor. Workshop unlocked. Basic chemistry. Design available. 3-stage filter charcoal, sand, cloth. It's not complicated once the workshop lays it out. Charcoal from burned wood, packed sand from the stream bed, cloth strips layered to catch what the first 2 stages miss. All of it housed in a length of bamboo split and hollowed. I build 3 of them in an afternoon, 1 for the house, 2 smaller ones for when we're further from home. Yuna's the first one to drink from the filtered water once it's running, cautious, watching my face like she's waiting for me to admit it's a trick. It isn't. The water comes out clear and cold and doesn't taste like the pool that put her on her back that morning. "Thank you," she says. 2 words, quiet, but it's more than she said directly to me in days. And I notice it the way I noticed her not asking for a room. Soap comes next, almost as an afterthought. Ash from the fire mixed with rendered fat from the last snared animal, boiled down into something crude and harsh that still beats nothing. Small thing. It matters anyway, the kind of thing that turns survival into something closer to actually living. The real turning point comes from a pile of debris Era finds 3 days later, further down the beach than we've bothered searching before. A section of the ship's hull that washed up mostly intact. Along with a tangle of cable, a cracked but salvageable battery casing, and enough scrap metal to make my hands itch to break it all down immediately. Workshop unlocked. Basic electrical. Design available. Water wheel generator. Low output. The stream runs fast enough near the well to turn a wheel, and the workshop walks me through the shape of it piece by piece over 2 full days. A wooden wheel with paddles cut to the right pitch. A simple drive shaft, a housing for the salvaged battery, copper wire from the pipe I broke down back on the first real day here, wound and seated the way the workshop insists it has to be wound. No shortcuts, no guessing, it's the hardest thing I've built so far. My hands are raw by the end of the first day, and the workshop's quiet confirmation of each piece stops feeling like magic and starts feeling like actual work. The kind that costs something even when it isn't progress being spent. Aira works alongside me on the second day, once she sees what it's meant to become. She doesn't need the workshop to understand a water wheel. That part's just physics, and physics is the one language she's fluent in without any system's help. "You know what this could actually be?" she says, tightening a joint I've just fitted if this works. "Light," I say. "After dark. Actual light." "After dark," she repeats, like she's tasting the idea. You have no idea what that means until you've spent a week in the dark the second the sun goes down. I have some idea. I've spent the same week she has. The wheel turns on the second evening, slow at first, then steadier as the current catches the paddles properly. The battery housing hums faintly. Not much, not enough to power anything large, but enough, the workshop confirms, for a few small bulbs salvaged and rewired from the ship's debris. I have exactly 1 battery's worth of charge and a choice about what to spend it on, and it isn't a small choice. Progress. Stored charge available, limited. Option A, lighthouse interior. Option B, reserve for future tool/signal use. Reserve makes the practical argument for itself. Save the charge, use it later for something that might matter more than seeing indoors after dark. Some tool down the line. Maybe a signal if a ship ever passes close enough to notice. Spending it now on light is comfort, plain and simple, nothing more strategic than that. I spend it on light anyway. I wire the single working bulb into the corner room, Yuna's room, though I don't think about that choice until after I've already made it, and run the wire back to the battery housing near the well. And when full dark comes, and I flip the crude switch the workshop helped me shape from a scrap of metal, the bulb catches and holds, dim and yellow and utterly, completely electric. Nobody says anything for a second. May's the one who breaks first, stepping into the small pool of light like she needs to touch it to believe it's real. That's after dark. We've had fire, just fire, for a week. I know, I say. This is light, actual light, like a room in an actual house. Her voice cracks slightly on the last word. Not from sadness, from something closer to relief that's been building since the ship went down and finally found somewhere to go. She looks at me across the small yellow glow, and for a second the mask she's worn since the first night, the sharp comments, the demanding tone, the armor of someone used to having things handed to her, just isn't there at all. Thank you, she says, quiet, no edge to it whatsoever. For all of it, not just the light. I don't know what to say to that. So I just nod, and the moment holds a second longer than it needs to before Era breaks it by asking whether the wheel can power more than one bulb eventually, and the practical conversation swallows the quiet one, which is probably easier for everyone. We sit outside that night instead of going straight to sleep, all four of us around the low fire with the single lit window glowing behind us. A strange dual light, old fire, new electricity. That feels like it means something bigger than 4 bulbs worth of power actually justifies. Yuna talks more than she has since the ship went down. Small things, nothing about the wreck or whatever she lost in it, just a question about how the water wheel works, genuinely curious. And Era answers at length, clearly delighted to have someone ask. May sits closer to the fire than usual, quieter than usual, watching the lit window like she's committing it to memory. I think about the fragment still sitting in the small chest of salvaged odds and ends near the well, still unexplained, still giving off that same faint pulse of unformed interest whenever I pick it up. Whatever this island used to be before 4 shipwrecked strangers washed up on it, it's becoming something new now. 1 wall and 1 filter and 1 bulb at a time. Tomorrow there's more to build. Tonight, for the first time, it feels less like survival and more like the beginning of something that might actually last. The workshop's been dangling metalworking in front of me since that first pipe broke apart on the beach, locked behind a requirement I finally understand once I actually look for it. Iron ore, or something close enough to it, and none of what we've salvaged from the wreck counts as raw enough to satisfy the tier. Material required. Iron ore unprocessed. Nearest source. Unknown. Recommend expedition inland. Inland means past the stream, past the hills where we've cut clay and stone, into terrain none of us have actually walked. It means leaving the house for more than a day, which means leaving 2 people behind it while 2 people go. I'm coming, Era says, before I've even finished explaining the plan. You'll need someone who can tell ore from regular rock, and that's not going to be you. She's not wrong. I know wood. I'm starting to know clay and stone because the workshop's been teaching me by making me build with them. Ore is a different language entirely, and Era's the only one of us who ever cracked open a geology textbook before the ship went down. May volunteers next, fast enough that I suspect it's less about the expedition and more about not being left behind while Era gets to do something interesting with me. I say no before I've thought too hard about why. Someone needs to hold the house, I say. Keep the fire fed, keep the filters running, keep the garden watered. That's not nothing. May's jaw tightens. That's babysitting a well pump. That's keeping 3 people alive while we're gone, I say. I'd rather trust that job to someone I know will actually do it right. It's not a lie, and it's not entirely diplomatic either, and I watch it land somewhere between a compliment and a consolation prize on May's face. She doesn't argue further, which by now I've learned means she's decided to be annoyed about it quietly instead of loudly. Yuna says she'll stay too without being asked, already gathering the empty water bottles like the decision was never actually in question. The hills climb harder than they looked from the beach, jungle thickening the further we push, the stream narrowing to a trickle and then vanishing under rock entirely. Ira reads the terrain like she's translating a language only she speaks, pointing out rust-colored streaks in exposed rock faces, testing weight and texture of loose stone with a frown that means no, and then, on the second day, a frown that means finally. Here, she says, crouched at an exposed seam where a rock slide's peeled back the hillside. This is it. Or close enough that the workshop can probably tell us the rest. Material detected. Iron ore low-medium grade. I feed a chunk of it through the workshop's assessment and get back confirmation, along with a first glimpse of the next tier waiting behind it. A forge, a proper one, not the open fire I've been shaping wood over for 2 weeks. Category unlocked. Basic metallurgy. Design available. Bloomery furnace clay, stone. We spend most of the second day hauling ore down toward a flat clearing closer to the house than the deposit itself, because carrying finished metal is a lot lighter than carrying raw ore back and forth every time we need more. It's brutal work. Ira and I both end the day with backs that don't want to straighten and hands that have gone past raw into numb. It's on the walk back toward that clearing, dusk settling fast under the canopy, that we find the first thing that isn't ore, isn't wildlife, isn't anything we put there ourselves. A cleared patch of ground, deliberate, not natural. The remains of a fire pit, cold, old enough that rains washed most of the ash away, but recent enough that it hasn't fully returned to jungle floor. And near it, half buried in leaf litter, a length of chain with a crude iron cuff still fastened to one end. Ira goes very still next to me. That's not from the ship, she says quietly. The ship didn't carry chains like that. I crouch to look closer without touching it. The cuff's rough, hand-forged, nothing like factory metal. Someone made this, deliberately, for exactly the purpose it looks like it was for. There are drag marks in the dirt nearby, old enough to be faint, still readable enough to tell a story I don't like. We're not alone on this island, I say. We knew that was possible, Era says. This is different from possible. We don't linger. Whoever made this camp and whoever they kept chained here could be anywhere on an island we've barely explored a fraction of, and neither of us wants to find out by accident in fading light. We move fast and quiet back toward the clearing where we've stockpiled the ore, and further still toward home, and I don't fully relax until the familiar shape of the water wheel comes into view against the dark. May and Yuna are waiting up, the single bulb lit in the corner room casting its small yellow glow across the yard, and the question of what to tell them sits in my chest the whole walk back, like a stone I haven't decided whether to put down. 2 chained women wouldn't sleep easy tonight if I described what we found in detail. Yuna especially, still fragile in ways she's only slowly climbing out of, still flinching at things that remind her too directly of the ship going down. May's not fragile in the same way, but she's not built for quiet dread either. She processes fear loudly. And loud isn't what any of us need with a strange camp somewhere in the jungle and no idea how close or how dangerous whoever built it might be. So I tell them the practical half, or found, forge design unlocked, a long 2 days of hauling ahead of us, and I pull Era aside once the other 2 have gone to check the garden, and tell her the rest in a lower voice. We should tell them everything, Era says, arms crossed, not quite an argument, more a statement she wants me to push back on if I disagree. Eventually. Not tonight. I look toward the house, toward the lit window, toward 2 people who finally started sleeping through full nights instead of jolting awake at every sound. I want a plan before I hand them something to be afraid of. Right now I don't have one. I just have a chain in the dirt and no idea whose it was or where they are now. Ira doesn't love it. I can see that much on her face. But she doesn't argue further either, which from her means she's decided to trust the reasoning even if she doesn't fully agree with the choice. If it happens again, she says, if we find more, everyone knows. All of it. No more deciding for them. Agreed. The forge goes up over the following days regardless, because ore doesn't smelt itself, and the island doesn't stop needing tools just because something unsettling turned up in the jungle. Clay and stone, the same materials that built the house, shaped now into something taller, hollow, chimney-like. The workshop confirming draft and airflow the same patient way it's confirmed every joint and knot since the beginning. The first smelt takes most of a day, ore and charcoal layered and fed and tended while the workshop walks me through temperatures I have no instinct for and no business understanding without its help. What comes out at the end isn't much. A rough bloom of iron, impure, barely enough to matter. But it's iron, pulled from rock by hands and fire and a system that started as a voice in my head over a shipwrecked branch. Ira works the bellows beside me for most of it, and somewhere in the long hours of feeding the fire and watching metal change, the tension of what we found in the jungle gets set aside. Not forgotten, just deferred, the way everything gets deferred when there's real work directly in front of you. 3 days, she says at one point, watching the coals glow. 3 days of hauling, and we haven't even made anything yet. Just the raw metal. The expedition cost us 3 days and most of the dried meat, I say. We're down to what's left in the garden and whatever the snares catch until that's replenished. It's a real cost. Worth it? I look at the small, rough lump of iron cooling near the forge. The first tool metal this island has produced, the first real step past wood and clay and stone. Ask me again once we've forged something out of it. She almost smiles at that, tired and dust-streaked and entirely unbothered by the answer not being a clean yes. That night, once Era's finally asleep and the forge has gone cold, I sit outside with the fragment from the beach turned over in my hands again. The same faint pulse of unformed interest it always gives. And think about chains in the dirt and a fire pit gone cold long before we ever found it. Whoever's out there has been on this island longer than we have. Long enough to build something, long enough to lose interest in maintaining a camp that far inland, long enough to have chained someone and moved them somewhere else. Or worse. I don't know yet if that's a threat sitting quiet on the other side of the island, or a threat that's already noticed the smoke rising from our own forge fire against the evening sky. Either way, tomorrow the forge stays lit, and the tools we shape out of this first bloom of iron aren't going to be only for building. The first tools out of the bloom iron are ugly. A knife that holds an edge for exactly as long as I need it to, and not a moment longer. A hoe head that works, but looks like it lost a fight with the forge. The workshop doesn't hide the roughness from me. Every piece comes with a quiet note of what could be better, what the next tier of metalworking would fix. Patient in a way that feels less like a game system and more like an actual teacher who expects me to earn the next lesson. Category progression, metalworking. Tier 2. Locked. Requirement. Refined silicon rare material. Silicon means glass, batteries that hold more than a trickle of charge, and eventually, the workshop shows me the shape of it without letting me touch it yet. Solar cells that don't depend on a stream running fast enough to turn a wheel. It also means another expedition, further than the ore deposit, into terrain the workshop flags as requiring more searching than digging. I don't push for it immediately. The forge already ate 3 days and most of our dried meat once. Before I ask for more of that, I want the house running smoother than it currently is. The extra rooms come first. Ira's idea, floated over breakfast with the kind of certainty that means she's already thought it through. 4 people, 1 house, no walls between us except the one around Yuna's corner. That's fine for surviving. It's not fine long-term. She's right, and the forge makes it possible in a way it wasn't a week ago. Iron nails instead of lashed vine at every joint, a proper door hinge instead of a woven mat hung over a gap. The house grows by 2 rooms over several days, framing shaped clean by the workshop's guidance. Walls packed with clay the way we've done twice now, until my hands know the motion without thinking about it. May claims the second new room before anyone else can suggest otherwise, which nobody minds this time. There's enough house now that claiming space doesn't cost anyone else theirs. The bathhouse comes next. Smaller, simpler, built around a stone basin, the workshop helps me shape and a wood-fired boiler design that's frankly more clever than I expected from myself. Copper coil salvaged from the same cable I broke down weeks ago, wound through the firebox, heating water as it passes rather than requiring a separate fire to boil each bucket. Hot water, May says, the first time it actually works, standing in the doorway of the half-finished bathhouse with an expression I haven't seen on her since the lit bulb. An actual hot bath, on this island. Don't get used to it being fast, I say. The boiler only heats what passes through. No deep soaking for an hour. I don't care. I have not been warm since the ship went down. It's 3 nights after the bathhouse first works that Era sees something. She's up later than the rest of us, checking the water wheel's housing for a rattle she noticed that afternoon. And I only know something happened because she comes back into the house faster than she left it, closing the door behind her with more care than the situation seems to need. There was someone at the tree line, she says, low, glancing toward May and Yuna's doors to make sure they're still shut, watching. I only saw the shape of it for a second before it was gone. Animal? No. She says it flatly enough that I don't push back. It moved like a person, stayed low, stayed in shadow, and it left the second it realized I'd seen it. Animals don't do that. I think about the chain in the dirt, the cold fire pit, the drag marks and old leaf litter. Whoever's out there just confirmed they know exactly where we are. You told me everyone knows next time, I say. This is next time. Era nods, jaw tight. Tomorrow. Not tonight. Nobody's sleeping well after that conversation, and everyone needs sleep more than they need to lie awake scared. I tell May and Yuna the full truth the next morning. The camp we found, the chain, and now Era's watcher at the tree line last night. I watch it land on both of them differently. May's fear comes out as anger, sharp questions about why she wasn't told sooner, a flush of color in her face that's more frightened than furious, even though it sounds like the second thing. Yuna goes quiet in the way she used to go quiet in the first days after the wreck, knees drawing up, eyes on the door. We're not defenseless, I say, before the silence stretches too long. We have a forge now, we have iron. Whoever's out there hasn't tried anything yet. They're watching, not attacking, which means they're cautious, which means we have time to get less vulnerable before anything happens. Or it means they're planning something, May says. Could be both. I don't lie to her about the uncertainty. I'd rather prepare for both than pretend it's only the good option. The perimeter goes up over the next 2 days. Not a wall. We don't have the material or the time for a proper wall yet, but a ring of trip lines through the tree line approach. Thin salvaged wire connected to a scavenged section of the water wheel's electrical circuit. Rigged to trigger a sharp bell-like clang from a suspended piece of scrap metal the instant anything crosses the line at ankle height. It's crude. It's also, the workshop confirms, genuinely functional. Enough current diverted from the wheel's output to trigger a mechanical strike without draining the house lights. An early answer wrapped around a problem I hadn't planned on solving this soon. Ira helps run the lines, testing each one twice, satisfied only once she's tripped every single one herself and confirmed the bell rings loud enough to wake the house. It won't stop anyone determined, she says, coiling the last length of wire, but it'll tell us they're coming instead of us finding out the hard way. That's the point, I say. Tactics, not walls. We don't have time to outbuild a threat we don't understand yet. We can outwarn it. The tripline proves itself 2 nights later, though not against anything human. The bell goes off just after midnight, a harsh metallic clang that has all 4 of us up and moving before conscious thought catches up. By the time I'm at the garden fence with a torch, there's a shape already tangled in the outer edge of the crop rows. Something low, dog-like, teeth bared, dragging half a tripline with it in a panic that's making things worse for it, not better. I don't approach with the iron knife first. The workshop flagged this exact scenario when I built the perimeter, quiet confirmation that the tripwire's current, though weak, runs enough charge through the tangled section to make anything caught in it deeply unwilling to stay. It proves right. The animal thrashes once more, yelps at the current biting through fur, and tears free hard enough to snap the line rather than endure another second of it, vanishing back into the dark far faster than it came. The garden's damaged, a few crushed rows, nothing that can't regrow, but nothing's dead, nobody's hurt, and the whole thing resolved itself without a single blow struck. That's what I meant, I say, to Ira, standing beside me in the torchlight with a length of iron in her hand she never got the chance to use. We didn't fight it. We just made this place cost more trouble than it was worth. She looks at the snapped trip line, then at the retreating dark where the animal vanished. Works on wildlife. We don't actually know yet if it'll work on whoever was watching from the tree line. No, I admit, we don't know that yet. We repair the line before dawn, and I spend the rest of that day turning over the same question that's been sitting under everything since the ore expedition. Whoever built that camp, whoever watched us from the tree line, they've had this island longer than we have, and every piece of infrastructure we build, the house, the bathhouse, the trip lines, the smoke that must be visible from our forge fire most evenings, makes us harder to ignore. I don't know yet if that means a threat or an opportunity. I don't know if the person Era saw was scouting us the way I'd scout a rival, or watching the way someone watches a fire from very far away, wondering if it's finally safe to walk toward it. Either way, the perimeter stays up, the forge stays lit, and for the first time since the ship went down, I start thinking less about survival and more about what it would take to actually defend something worth defending. Nobody's seen the Watcher since that night at the tree line, which doesn't mean nobody's out there. It means whoever it was got what they needed from watching and hasn't found a reason to come back yet or hasn't found the nerve. Either way, the perimeter stays up, checked every morning, and the island keeps demanding to be built regardless of what might be moving through it unseen. The greenhouse is Yuna's idea, more or less, though she doesn't put it that plainly. I catch her on her knees by the garden one morning, frowning at a row of struggling seedlings that never quite recovered from the animal that tore through them weeks back. And she says, almost to herself, they need more heat and less rain hitting them directly, not a wall, something they can see the sun through. You know plants, I say. It's not a question. She goes still for a second, the way she still does whenever a conversation edges toward anything about her life before the wreck. Someone I knew grew things. Properly, not just a backyard garden. I used to help. She doesn't finish the sentence about who someone was, and I don't push. Show me what you mean, I say instead. And she does. Sketching in the dirt with a stick, a frame with panels angled to catch the sun, gaps for airflow, a design that's more thought out than anything I would have come up with on my own. The workshop confirms it as a real structure the moment I focus on the idea. Glass panels drawn from the silicon we still don't have enough of, substituted for now with stretched, oiled cloth that lets light through well enough to serve until better materials available. We can build this, I say. Yuna looks at her own sketch like she's surprised it turned into something real just by being said out loud. The greenhouse takes 4 days, most of it framing, and the tedious work of stretching and oiling cloth panels until they hold shape without sagging. Yuna works on it every day without being asked, hands sure in a way they aren't sure about almost anything else, directing me on angles and spacing with a quiet confidence that's new. Mai watches this happen with an expression I can't quite read the first few times. Not jealousy exactly, something closer to noticing. By the 3rd day she's out there too, not doing much useful, but asking Yuna actual questions about the plants. Listening to the answers instead of talking over them the way she might have a month ago. "You're good at this," Mai tells her, watching Yuna transplant a seedling with more care than the task strictly requires. "I used to be better," Yuna says. Quiet, not sad exactly, just honest. "You'll get there again." Mai says it simply, no performance in it, and Yuna looks up at her like the sentence surprised her more than it should have. By the time the greenhouse stands finished, warm, humid rows of seedlings inside it doing visibly better than anything left exposed to open weather, it's clear the island has changed shape entirely from the one we washed up on a month ago. A house with real rooms, a working well, a forge, a bathhouse with hot water, now a greenhouse growing food faster and more reliably than the open garden ever managed. I stand at the tree line one evening, looking back at all of it lit by the water wheel's small string of bulbs, and it doesn't look like a survival camp anymore. It looks like the start of a town. The Silicon expedition happens the following week because the workshop won't budge on metalworking Tier 2 without it, and I've put it off as long as I reasonably can. Eira comes again. She's become the default second set of hands for anything that requires actually understanding the terrain, and this time Mai insists on coming too, hard enough that I don't have the energy to argue her out of it. "I've hauled stone, I've hauled clay, I've hauled ore secondhand while you two gotta go find it," she says. I'm not staying behind again. Yuna stays, this time without needing to be asked twice. The greenhouse needs tending, and it's clearly become something closer to hers than anyone else's at this point. The search for silicon-bearing rock takes us further from the house than we've gone before, deep enough into unfamiliar terrain that even Eira's confidence in reading the land starts to thin. We find what we're looking for on the 2nd day. A deposit the workshop confirms is workable, more of it than expected, enough to justify the trip several times over. It's on the walk back, cutting a slightly different route to avoid a ravine that slowed us on the way in, that the trees thin out enough to give us a clear view down into a shallow valley we haven't explored before. There's smoke rising from it. Not one thin trail like our own forge fire, several, thick enough to see clearly even at this distance, rising from behind what's unmistakably a palisade wall. Tall timber stakes lashed together in a rough perimeter far larger than anything we've built. Nobody says anything for a moment. "That's not a camp," Eira says finally. Quiet. "That's a settlement." Mai's gone very pale. How many people does something like that take to build? I don't have an answer. What I have is the memory of a chain in the dirt weeks ago, and the certainty, looking at that palisade, that whoever built it has been here far longer than we have, with far more hands than the 4 of us. There are shapes moving along the wall, too distant to make out clearly, but distinct enough to count as more than a handful. And even from this distance, carried faintly on the wind, there's a sound underneath the general hum of a working camp that doesn't sound like ordinary labor. Sharp, raised, cut off fast, the kind of sound that could be an argument and could be something worse. "We should go closer," Mai says, low. "Just enough to actually see what's happening?" "No." I say it before she's finished the sentence. 3 of us, in the open, with no idea how many people are down there, or what they do to strangers who wander into view. We don't have the numbers or the information to risk that. So we just walk away? After hearing that? We walk away and we come back better prepared, I say. Or we find out what that was from someone who already knows, instead of getting caught finding out ourselves. Eira backs me without hesitation, already turning us away from the ridgeline, keeping low, keeping quiet. Mai doesn't argue further, but she looks back toward the valley twice before the trees close it off from view entirely. And I know the sound we heard is going to sit with her the same way the chain in the dirt has sat with me for weeks. We don't run the whole way back, but we move fast, and nobody relaxes until the familiar shape of the water wheel comes into view against the evening sky. Yuna's waiting at the greenhouse, and the look on her face when she sees how fast we're walking tells me she reads the tension before any of us say a word. I tell her everything that night. All 4 of us together this time. No deciding for anyone. Exactly the promise Eira made me keep back at the ore expedition. "A wall that size," Yuna says slowly, "once I've finished, means they're not just surviving either. They've built something real. Same as us. Or worse than us," Mai says. That sound we heard wasn't people building a wall. That was someone being hurt. Nobody argues the point, because none of us can say for certain she's wrong. That night, Once the others have gone to bed, I sit outside near the greenhouse with the fragment from the beach turned over in my hands again. Still unexplained, still pulsing faintly whenever I focus on it, a mystery that feels smaller now than it did a month ago, dwarfed by the much larger and much more immediate question of what's happening in that valley behind the palisade wall. We're technologically further along than anything I saw over that ridge. Electric light, a working forge, hot water, a greenhouse standing where a month ago there was only jungle. Numbers and weapons are a different story entirely. 4 of us against a wall built by however many people it takes to raise a perimeter that size, none of us trained for a fight. All of our advantages built for growing things rather than defending them. We're not weaker than this island anymore. We're not stronger than what's over that ridge either. Somewhere in between, close enough to have caught their attention, not close enough to survive being found by them on their terms instead of ours. I put the fragment away and look back at the house. Real walls, real light, 4 rooms instead of 1 shared shelter, a greenhouse that grows more food than the 4 of us can eat. Whatever's happening in that valley, we're not ready for it yet. But we're not the same 4 people who crawled out of the surf a month ago either, and that has to count for something when the time comes that it matters. 3 days after the ridge, the trip line goes off in broad daylight. Not the panicked scramble of that first midnight alarm. This time the bell rings once, clean, deliberate, and doesn't ring again. I'm at the tree line with an iron blade in my hand before I've fully processed what that means. Someone crossed the line on purpose, slowly enough to trigger it once and stop. They want us to know they're here. Ira is beside me within seconds. May and Yuna close behind and past the tree line. Standing in the open where the perimeter path bends toward the house are 2 men I've never seen before. Armed, crude spears, one with a machete that's seen real use, but standing still, hands visible, no aggression in the posture. Scouts, not an assault. "We're not here to start anything," the older one calls out, voice pitched to carry without shouting. "Just came to see what all that smoke's been about." I don't lower the blade. You're a long way from home. "So are you," he says, and there's something almost amused in it. "Didn't expect a place like this out here. Water wheel, real light at night. That's more than we managed, and we've had longer." Neither of them makes a move toward the perimeter itself. After a long, tense minute, the older one raises both hands slightly, a gesture that reads as deliberate rather than submissive. Our leader wants to talk. Face to face. He'll come alone if that's what it takes to make it happen. Alone, I repeat. His word, not mine. He doesn't offer that to just anyone. I look at Ira. She gives the smallest shake of her head. Not now, not like this. And I agree with the instinct even before I've fully thought it through. Whoever their leader is, meeting him without any preparation on the same day his scouts just confirmed exactly how much we have worth wanting, isn't a conversation I want to walk into blind. Tomorrow, I say. Midday. He comes to the tree line, alone, unarmed as far past that line as I can see him. We talk there, not closer. The scout studies me for a second, then nods, like the terms are more reasonable than he expected. He'll be here. Nobody sleeps well that night. We spend it instead doing the only useful thing available, checking every trip line twice, moving anything valuable further from open sight lines, and talking through what little we actually know. A settlement large enough to need a palisade that size, a leader confident enough to send scouts openly rather than staying hidden. Whatever we're about to meet, it isn't desperate or cautious. It's established. What if this is just the opening move, May says, sitting close to the fire despite the mild night. Scouts today, an offer tomorrow, and then whatever happens if we say no. Could be, I say. I don't lie to any of them anymore about the uncertainty. It's cost me nothing but honesty since the night at the tree line, and it's earned something back every time. We say no to whatever we need to say no to. We're not folding into someone else's camp because they built a bigger wall first. Yuna, quiet by the fire, finally speaks. You don't know what he's going to offer yet. No, I admit. But I know what kind of camp keeps chains in the dirt this far from wherever they actually live. Whatever the offer is, I doubt it's generous. He comes exactly at midday, exactly alone, and even from a distance there's no mistaking which of them is the leader before anyone says his name. He walks like a man used to rooms going quiet when he enters them, unhurried, upright, a presence built more from certainty than size, though he's not small either. Weathered in a way that reads as military, rather than merely survival-worn, a scar through one eyebrow that's old enough to have stopped meaning anything except as decoration. Crane, he says, stopping a deliberate distance from the tree line, hands open at his sides. You must be the one they're all talking about. Dan, I say. I don't offer more than that. He looks past me at the house, the water wheel, the greenhouse just visible beyond the garden, And there's genuine appreciation in his expression, not performance. I've had people on this island longer than you have by a good margin. Never occurred to any of us to build like this. Real infrastructure. Most people just survive out here. You built a town. We had reasons to try. Everyone has reasons. He smiles. Easy. Practiced. I run a settlement about half a day's walk from here. Bigger than this, older than this, but I'll be honest with you. Nothing in it looks like what you've put together in a month. That's worth something. Worth what exactly? Crane's smile doesn't waver, but something behind it sharpens. I came to offer a partnership. My people, your workshop, my organization, your infrastructure, combined, we're both stronger than either of us alone. I'd bring you in as second in command. Real authority, real respect, second only to me. Aira, standing just behind my shoulder, says nothing, but I feel the tension in her go up a notch. And the people already in your settlement, I say. What happens to them if we merge? Same as always. Everyone contributes, everyone's protected, everyone follows the same rules that keep the place running. He says it smoothly, the kind of sentence built to sound complete while answering nothing. What rules? I say. The ones that work? A flicker of impatience, quickly smoothed over. Look, I'm not here to argue philosophy. I'm here with a real offer. Your people. His eyes move briefly to May, then Yuna, then back to me, an inventory disguised as a glance. Would be well looked after. Everyone finds their place. That's how it's worked for months, and it works. That single glance tells me everything the smooth sentences were built to hide. Their place, I say, meaning whatever place you decide for them. Crane's expression cools by exactly 1 degree, the first honest thing he's shown since he arrived. Meaning the same as everyone's place in any working settlement. Someone leads, someone follows, and the ones who follow are grateful they're not fending for themselves out here alone. That's not cruelty. That's how anything survives. Behind me, I hear May's breath catch, sharp and quiet, and I don't need to look back to know exactly what she's understood from that sentence. I think about the chain in the dirt, the drag marks in old leaf litter, the sound carried faintly on the wind from behind that palisade wall, sharp and cut off fast. I think about 4 people who built a home out of driftwood and stubbornness, none of whom are anyone's place to assign. No, I say. Crane's face doesn't change immediately, like the word hasn't fully landed yet. No to the title, or no to the whole offer? No to all of it. We're not merging into anything where people get assigned a place by someone else's authority. We built this ourselves. We'll keep building it ourselves. You understand what you're turning down? He says, voice still level. But there's an edge under it now that wasn't there a minute ago. I have numbers you don't have, organization you don't have. This, he gestures at the house, the wheel, the greenhouse, is impressive for a month's work. It's still 4 people. It's still 4 people who said no to you, I say, to your face, on our own land. That's worth something too. For just a second, brief, involuntary, gone almost as fast as it appears, something flashes across Crane's face that isn't calm at all. Not quite anger. Something closer to disbelief, the specific disbelief of a man who has not heard the word no directed at him in a very long time, delivered without hesitation. In front of people who work for him and are still within earshot back at the tree line where his scouts wait. He recovers fast, smooths it over with another easy smile that doesn't reach his eyes this time. Your choice, he says. I hope it's the right one, for their sake. He glances once more, briefly, toward May and Yuna, and I feel the threat under the pleasantry as clearly as if he'd said it outright. Then he turns and walks back toward the tree line, unhurried, the same measured pace he arrived with, and doesn't look back once before the jungle swallows him. Nobody speaks for a long moment after he's gone. You just told the leader of a settlement with a wall like that? No, May says finally, voice unsteady to his face, in front of his own men. Yes. Was that smart? I look toward the tree line, empty now, and think about a scarred eyebrow and an easy smile that stopped reaching his eyes the second I said no. I think about how a man like that walks, used to rooms going quiet, used to compliance arriving without resistance, and what it costs someone like that to be refused publicly, by 4 people with no army, no wall, nothing but a water wheel and a garden and a workshop no one else understands. I don't know if it was smart, I say, honestly. I know it was right, and I know he's not going to let it go quietly. Ira's already moving toward the trip lines, checking each one with new urgency, no longer testing for animals. Yuna's gone pale but steady, watching the tree line the way she used to watch the surf. Mei stands very still, arms wrapped around herself. And when she finally speaks again, her voice has lost the tremor from a moment ago, replaced by something harder. Then we get ready, she says, whatever that means. I look at the house we built out of nothing. The light in the windows, 3 people who trust me enough to still be standing here after everything I just turned down on their behalf. That's exactly what it means, I say, starting today. The first sign comes 4 days after Crane walks away from the tree line. Not an attack, nothing that loud, just a section of the garden fence found loose in the morning. Posts worked free rather than broken. The kind of damage a hand does deliberately and quietly, rather than the kind an animal does in a panic. Someone was here, Aira says, crouched by the fence, studying the disturbed dirt. Careful about it. No footprints they didn't try to brush out. Nothing's stolen. Nothing's actually broken beyond repair. It reads less like theft and more like a message. We can reach you whenever we want. I reinforce the fence that morning and say nothing to Crane's absent messengers, because there's nothing useful to say to an empty tree line, and instead spend the day thinking through what quiet pressure like this is meant to accomplish. Not destruction. Not yet. Just enough disruption to remind us how exposed we are, without giving us anything solid enough to retaliate against. The real attempt comes 2 nights later, and this one isn't subtle at all. A shape moving low near the forge shed just after midnight, caught not by the trip line, which the intruder clearly studied and avoided, but by Yuna, who's taken to sitting near the greenhouse some nights when sleep won't come easily, and who sees the shadow before it reaches the shed door. Her shout brings the rest of us out fast enough that whoever it is doesn't get further than the doorframe before scrambling back into the dark, except he doesn't quite make it clean. I catch him at the tree line itself, tackle more from momentum than any actual skill, and end up with a thrashing, wiry man pinned under me who's younger than I expected, barely older than May, breathing hard with more fear in it than defiance. "Don't," he says, before I've even decided what I'm doing next. "Please, I wasn't going to hurt anyone, I swear. I just needed..." "Needed what?" I say, not loosening my grip. "The blueprints. Anything about the forge, the filters, whatever Crane wants copied. He said if I brought back something useful, he'd move me up a rank. That's all. I wasn't going to touch any of you." Aira arrives with a torch, May and Yuna close behind her, and the light shows a young face, hollow-cheeked in a way that goes past simple hunger, a rope burn scar visible on one wrist where his sleeve's ridden up. I think about the chain in the dirt from weeks ago. I think about what kind of settlement produces a scared kid willing to risk his life sneaking into enemy territory for the promise of a rank he's clearly desperate enough to gamble everything on. I let him up. "Go," I say. "Tell Crane whatever you want about tonight, but you're not stealing anything, and I'm not hurting you for trying." He stares at me like the sentence doesn't parse, glances once at Ira's still raised torch, then bolts into the dark without another word. "You just let him go," May says, incredulous. "He was trying to steal from us. He was trying to survive whatever Crane's rank system does to people who fail," I say. "Killing him or hurting him doesn't make our forge safer. It just makes us the kind of place that hurts scared kids for being scared." Aira doesn't argue the point, though I can see her weighing it. Yuna, quiet beside her, just nods once, like the decision matches something she'd have chosen herself. It's 3 days later that the first runaways actually reach us. Not sent, not sneaking for Crane's benefit, but arriving on their own in the gray hour before dawn. 2 women who trip the perimeter line and then simply stand there in the open once it rings, hands raised, clearly hoping to be found rather than caught. One is older, maybe 40, moving with the careful stiffness of someone recovering from an injury that hasn't been treated properly. The other is younger, sharp-eyed, despite exhaustion, already scanning the tree line like she's cataloging exits even now. "We heard about the water wheel," the older woman says, voice raw. "The light at night. Someone said you turned away Crane's man to his face and he didn't punish you for it." She looks at me directly. "We didn't think that kind of place was real." "It's real," I say. "Are you hurt?" "My leg, old wound, never set right." She says it plainly, no self-pity in it, just a fact she's carried a long way to get here. The younger one speaks up before I can ask more. "I can work, whatever you need. I'm not asking for charity." I look at both of them. Exhausted, wary, clearly braced for the possibility that this door closes on them too. And think about the scared kid I let go 3 nights ago. And about a leader who assigns people their place and calls it survival. "Come inside," I say. "Food first. Everything else after." The older woman, once she's eaten and the leg's been looked at, introduces herself as Sarah, and it turns out fast that her limp isn't the only thing she brings with her. She knows medicine. Real medicine, not guesswork. Learned before the wreck that stranded her here months before ours ever hit the reef. She sets the leg's old break properly for the first time since it happened, wincing through her own pain to do it. And by the time she's done, Aira's already asking her a dozen questions about anything else she might know that could matter. "You're the engineer," Sarah says, watching Aira work. "They talked about you too. Said Crane's people were impressed before they were told not to be." Ira doesn't quite hide her reaction to being talked about by strangers half a day's walk away, somewhere between unsettled and grimly satisfied. The younger one, who gives her name as short and clipped, doesn't warm up as fast. She watches everyone with the particular wariness of someone who's learned that kindness can be a setup, and she keeps close to Sarah rather than to any of us, at least at first. Feeding 2 more mouths is not a small thing. I sit with the numbers that night, the garden's yield, the smoked meat stores, the greenhouse output that's good but not yet abundant. We're stretched thin already, I say to Era, once the newcomers are asleep. 2 more people and we're maybe 2 weeks from real shortage if we don't expand production. So we expand production, Ira says. More hands means more work gets done, not just more mouths to feed. Sarah knows medicine we don't have. That's worth more than the food she eats. She's right, and I know it, but the arithmetic still sits uneasy in my chest. A decision with a real cost attached, not an abstract one, made because it was right rather than because it was safe. Word travels back to Crane's camp faster than I expect because 2 nights after Sarah and the younger woman arrive, a 3rd runaway shows up. A boy. Younger even than the one I caught at the forge shed, half-starved and terrified, saying only that he heard people were actually leaving and making it, and that was enough to risk everything he had left. Era's instinct this time is caution rather than open arms. 3 and under a week, she says quietly, pulling me aside while the boy eats. That's either genuinely how bad it's gotten over there, or it's exactly the kind of pattern Crane would exploit. Send someone in under the cover of real runaways. Let us get comfortable trusting anyone who shows up scared. It's not paranoia. It's the same caution that's kept the perimeter up and the trip lines checked twice a day since Crane first walked out of the tree line. We don't turn anyone away, I say, but we don't hand anyone the run of the place immediately either. I think it through as I say it, shaping the compromise on the spot. New arrivals stay close to the house for the first few days, nothing sensitive, not the forge details, not the perimeter layout, until we're sure. Ira nods, satisfied with the balance. I'll keep an eye on the boy specifically. No offense meant to him if he's exactly what he looks like. None taken if he ever finds out, I say. The boy turns out over the following days to be exactly what he looks like. No hidden agenda, just a kid who ran because staying meant something worse. And who cries with relief the first night nobody raises a hand to him for a mistake. Sarah's leg heals properly under her own care. The sharp-eyed younger woman, whose name turns out to be short for something longer she doesn't offer yet, starts cautiously to help Era with small mechanical tasks, the wariness in her thawing by fractions rather than all at once. It's Sarah who ends up closest with Ira in those first days, tending to a scrape on Era's hand from forge work with the same care she gave her own leg. And I catch the 2 of them talking late one evening about something that isn't medicine or engineering at all. Just easy conversation between 2 people who've both spent a long time being the capable one in whatever room they're in. Crane's settlement is bleeding people it can't easily replace. And every runaway that reaches us instead makes his authority a little shakier back at that palisade wall, and makes our own walls, thin as they still are, a little more crowded with reasons worth defending. I don't know yet what that shakiness will cost us when it finally breaks. But the garden's expanding, the greenhouse output's climbing to meet the new mouths, and for the first time since Crane walked away from that meeting, it feels less like we're only waiting for the next attack, and more like we're actually growing into something that can survive it. The warning comes from Short, the sharp-eyed woman who arrived with Sarah, who's finally told us her full name is Tamsin, though everyone's kept calling her Short long enough that it's stuck as an actual nickname even after she stopped minding it. She still has contacts inside Crane's camp. Whispers passed hand to hand among people looking for the same door out that she found. And what reaches her 3 days after the boy's arrival isn't good. He's losing people faster than he can replace them, she says, gathering all of us in the main room that evening, voice low even though there's no one left to overhear but family at this point. 4 defections in 2 weeks is bad enough on its own, but it's making the ones still there question him out loud, where his own lieutenants can hear it. A man like Crane can't survive that kind of doubt spreading. He has to do something visible or he loses control of his own camp from the inside. Something visible meaning us, I say, meaning you specifically. He needs to make an example, and there's no better example than the place everyone's running to. Sarah, arm around the boy who still startles at loud noises, nods slowly. He'll come with everything he has left. Not to talk this time. We don't have long to prepare, and preparing means using everything the past month and a half has actually built rather than hoping it holds by accident. I walked the perimeter with Era the following morning, both of us thinking less like builders now and more like people who have to make an attacking force regret ever approaching. The trip line's good for warning, Era says, but it's not going to stop a real assault. We need it to cost them something before they even reach the wall. The workshop offers what it's been offering all along. Not a finished defense, just pieces, options that require material and time, and this time, a grimmer kind of imagination than building a greenhouse ever required. Design available. Concealed stake pit, metal tipped. Design available. Tripwire triggered snare, heavy load. We dig 3 shallow pits along the most direct approach from the tree line, iron stakes forged rough but sharp enough to matter, covered with woven mats and a thin scattering of leaf litter until they're near invisible against the surrounding ground. We rig heavy log snares in the denser brush, flanking the direct path, triggered by the same tripwire system already threading the perimeter, but wired now to release rather than only to ring a bell. May works alongside us the whole time, hauling stakes, packing dirt, showing none of the reluctance she carried in the earliest days of hauling stone. "I'm not standing in a corner while you build this," she says, when I ask if she wants a lighter task. "Whatever's coming, I'd rather have done something before it gets here." The boy and Tamsin help where they can. Small hands are useful for weaving the cover mats, and Tamsin's memory of Crane's camp layout tells us roughly what kind of numbers and weapons to expect. Crude spears and machetes mostly, a few pieces of actual salvaged metal from whatever wreck stranded his people here first. The attack comes at dusk 2 days later, exactly the hour Tamsin predicted. Enough light left to see by, dark enough that a fire's glow would carry further than it should. Time to hit us at the moment we're least rested and most likely to be caught mid-preparation for night. The trip line rings once, sharp, and this time it doesn't stop. I count shapes coming through the tree line as we take position, more than I expected. More than the 4 defections should have left Crane with if his numbers were as thin as Tamsin's information suggested. Which means he's brought people who don't want to be here as much as people who do. Crane himself is visible near the back of the group, directing rather than leading the charge, which tells me everything about how much he's willing to risk personally, now that the stakes are real. The first line hits the stake pits before they're close enough to see us clearly. 2 men go down hard, one impaled shallow enough to scream rather than die, the sound rippling panic through the ranks behind him. The snare fires a half-second later on the flanking approach, a log swinging free and taking a 3rd man off his feet entirely. It's ugly. It's not clean or heroic in the way the workshop's careful confirmations of joints and knots made everything feel over the past month and a half. It's people getting hurt because we built something specifically designed to hurt them before they could hurt us. And there's no part of tonight that feels like the greenhouse or the water wheel or any of the building that came before it. But it works. The charge fractures, momentum broken, and I use the gap it buys us to funnel the rest of them, shouting directions Era and I planned 2 days ago. Toward the killing ground we prepared instead of the direct line to the house. A narrow gap between 2 thickets where the ground's been left deliberately clear, easy, inviting, and where every angle's been thought through in advance. The fighting that follows isn't a fair fight, and it isn't meant to be. Iron tools shaped for building turn out to double, ugly and effective, as weapons in close quarters. And the 2 months of infrastructure we built pay for themselves in ways none of us wanted to test this directly. Ira fights beside me with a forged blade in each hand, faster than I expected. Years of some sport or training before the wreck showing through in ways she's never mentioned. It's mid-fight that everything nearly goes wrong. 2 of Crane's men break off from the main press and cut toward the house itself, toward the forge shed, where the workshop's early sketches and half the settlement's records are kept, and toward the boy, still inside, too young to be anywhere near the fighting line. Ira sees it half a second before I do, and breaks off to intercept, alone, faster than I can follow through the chaos of the killing ground. By the time I fight my way clear enough to reach her, she's down on one knee, blood soaking through her sleeve from a machete cut that caught her across the forearm as she threw herself between the boy and the man reaching for him. The boy's unhurt, pressed flat against the shed wall, eyes wide with a terror that's going to sit with him for a long time. Ira's attacker is down too, Tamsin's iron pipe having caught him from behind before he could finish what the machete started. "I'm fine," Era says, through gritted teeth, clearly not fine, blood running freely down her arm. "Go. Finish this. I don't want to leave her. I do anyway, because the fight isn't over and every second I spend here is a second Crane's remaining people have to regroup. The turn comes fast once the stake pits and snares have done their work and the killing grounds claimed its cost. Crane's people, never fully committed to this fight to begin with, start breaking off rather than pressing forward, the ones with the least loyalty to him the first to peel away into the dark. Crane himself, seeing his own numbers thinning in front of him rather than ours, does something none of us expected from the man who walked into our treeline meeting with total unhurried confidence. He retreats. Not a tactical withdrawal, not an orderly fallback. He turns and moves for the tree line himself, faster than his own remaining men. The first crack in the composure he wore like armor at that midday meeting weeks ago. It's not victory exactly watching him go. It's something else, a shift in the air that everyone on our side feels at the same moment. The first time since this began that he's the one running rather than us. The fighting stops raggedly after that, Crane's remaining attackers scattering rather than holding a line with no one left directing them, and within minutes the tree line's empty again. The way it was this morning, except now the ground between it and the house is scattered with the wreckage of exactly how much this cost to hold. The cost is real and immediate once the adrenaline burns off. Era's arm needs Sarah's full attention. The cut deep enough that it takes careful, patient work by firelight to close properly. Ira gritting through it without complaint, though her face has gone pale enough to worry everyone watching. Part of the garden fence is trampled flat. The forge shed's doorframe is cracked where someone tried to force it before Era and Tamsin stopped him. We've lost most of the stored charcoal, scattered and fouled in the fighting. Nobody died on our side. That's the number I keep returning to, sitting outside the house long after midnight while Sarah finishes with Era's arm inside. Nobody died, and it could have gone so much worse. And it still cost more than any of us were prepared to actually pay. One of Crane's men, captured rather than fled, sits bound near the well under Tamsin's watchful eye. Young, frightened, the same rank of desperate obedience I recognized in the boy who tried to steal our blueprints weeks ago. He watches us move around the wounded, watches Sarah work with real medicine instead of guesswork, watches nobody strike him or threaten him despite what he came here to do, and something in his expression shifts the longer he sits there. The same crack of disbelief I saw on Crane's face at the tree line, just aimed inward this time instead of out. "You're not going to hurt me," he says finally, not quite a question. "No," I say. "Crane said your people would kill me on sight if I was caught." "Crane says a lot of things," I say. "Doesn't make them true." He doesn't answer that, but he stops flinching every time someone walks near him. And by the time the sky starts lightening toward dawn, something in his posture has settled into the same quiet, careful hope I saw on Sarah's face the night she first stood at our perimeter line with her hands raised. Era's awake by sunrise, weak but lucid, arm bound tight in clean cloth, and the first thing she asks about isn't her own injury. "The boy," she says. "Is he fine? Untouched? You made sure of that?" She closes her eyes, some tension leaving her that wasn't just pain. "Good. That's good." I sit with her a while, the house quiet around us in the exhausted aftermath. May asleep in a chair she refused to leave through the night. Yuna keeping watch at the window with an iron blade across her knees that she's never had to use and clearly hopes never to. "He ran," Era says eventually, quiet, like she's still turning the fact over. Crane. "He actually ran. Yeah, that's not something a man like that comes back from easily, not with his own people watching." I think about the crack in his composure at the tree line weeks ago and the much larger crack tonight, visible to every one of his own men as he broke and ran before they did. Something shifted, not just in the fight itself, but in whatever balance of power has existed between his camp and ours since the moment he first walked out of the jungle expecting an easy yes. We're not the ones who ran tonight. It's not over, I say, because it isn't, because a man that publicly broken doesn't simply accept it and walk away for good. But it's different now. We're not just defending anymore. Era looks at me, exhausted, bandaged, and something that might be the beginning of a smile pulls at the corner of her mouth despite everything the night cost her. "No," she agrees. "I don't think we are. Recovery takes longer than any of us want it to." Ira's arm heals clean under Sarah's care, but slowly, the kind of slow that means no forge work, no hauling. Days spent frustrated and restless in a chair while everyone else rebuilds the fence and clears the trampled garden rows around her. "I hate this," she says, more than once, watching May and the boy work the fence line without her. "I should be out there." "You threw yourself between a man with a machete and a child," I say. "You've earned a few days of hating it from a chair." She doesn't have a good answer to that, so she settles for glaring at the fence instead, which at least keeps her entertained. The prisoner, the young guard Tamsin's been watching since the night of the assault, gives us a name eventually, Pell. And by the fourth day, he's stopped waiting to see if we'll change our minds about hurting him. He helps where he's allowed to, quiet, careful. The posture of someone recalibrating an entire understanding of how people are supposed to treat each other. "Crane doesn't lose people the way you're describing," he tells me one evening, unprompted, watching Sarah check the boy's still healing scrapes with the same gentle patience she gave Era's arm, not without punishing someone for it. "He's going to need this back. All of it. The settlement, the story, the fear that keeps his own camp in line. He can't just let this stand." How bad is it back there? I ask. Really? Pel's quiet for a moment. Bad enough that half of what's left is only staying because they're too scared to run and too scared to stay loyal at the same time. He knows that. He has to fix it soon, or he loses everything, not just us. Tamsin's contacts confirm it 3 days later. Whispered word carried by another quiet defection who slips through the perimeter at dusk with almost nothing but the news itself. Crane's gathering what remains of his loyal core, smaller now, harder, the ones who have nowhere else to go, and nothing left to lose by following him into something desperate. He's not planning another straight assault, Tamsin says, laying it out for all of us gathered in the main room. Not after last time. Word is he's talking about something faster, quieter, a raid instead of a battle. Grab something, or someone, and use it as leverage instead of trying to win with numbers he doesn't have anymore. The room goes very still. A hostage, May says, voice flat. Or fire, Tamsin says. Burn the greenhouse, the forge shed, anything that can't be easily rebuilt, and force you to spend everything you have just recovering instead of growing. Either one breaks you without needing to win a fight outright. I look around the room. Ira, arms still healing, jaw set with the particular anger of someone forced to sit through a threat instead of acting on it. May, closer to the center of every conversation these days than the girl who once sulked over a bedroom. Yuna, steady now in a way that would have seemed impossible the first week. Sarah and Tamsin and Pel and the boy, all people who weren't part of this a month ago, and are now as much a reason to fight as anyone who crawled off that sinking ship with me. For the first time since the ship went down, I don't feel like I'm reacting to whatever comes next. I feel like I'm the one who gets to decide what happens first. We go to them, I say. It lands harder than I expect, a room full of people going quiet all at once. Before he comes to us, I continue. He's weakened, disorganized, half his own people are one bad night from running the same way Sarah and Tamsin and Pel already did. If we wait for him to pick the time and place, we're handing him exactly the advantage he needs to make a desperate move actually work. That's a different thing than defending our own fence line, Era says, carefully, not arguing exactly, testing the weight of it. That's walking into his camp. I know. You'd be the aggressor, May says, not him. Not this time. I know that too. I don't dress it up as something cleaner than it is. But I'm not interested in matching what he's willing to do. Burn a greenhouse, take a hostage, with waiting patiently for him to try it. I'd rather end this on terms that don't put any of you at that kind of risk. Pel speaks up, quiet, careful of his place in a room that's still deciding how much to trust him. Most of the people still in his camp don't want this. They're staying because leaving feels more dangerous than staying, not because they believe in him anymore. If you come in loud and violent, you make them afraid of you instead? If you come in smart, then it's not everyone we're fighting, I finish. Just him, and whoever's actually still choosing him by the time it matters. We spend the next 2 days planning in a way that feels different from anything before it. Not building, not defending, but actually thinking through how to end something rather than survive it. Pel draws the camp's layout from memory, Tamsin cross-checking every detail against what she remembers before her own escape. Sarah maps out who's likely to break for the exits the moment real pressure hits, based on names and faces Pel and Tamsin both recognize. Ira, still healing but done sitting quietly on the sidelines of a plan this important, works out exactly what the workshop can offer in terms of actual advantage. Not more weapons exactly, but tools that buy us information and disruption without requiring a fight we don't need. A crude signal flare from salvaged components, meant to draw attention exactly where we want it and away from where we don't. Smoke bombs shaped from packed charcoal and a chemical mixture the workshop walks me through carefully, meant to create confusion rather than harm. Minimize casualties among his own people, Era says, laying out the plan on the third evening. May and Yuna and Sarah and Tamsin and Pel all crowded around the same table that used to just hold 4 plates of whatever the snares caught that day. Isolate Crane specifically. Give anyone who wants to stop fighting an actual way to do it without dying for a cause they don't even believe in anymore. And if he doesn't give them the chance, May says, if he forces it, then we deal with that when it happens, I say. But we go in trying not to make this worse than it has to be. That matters. Even now. That night, with the plan mostly settled and the actual raid still a day away, none of us are ready to sleep. The house is too full of the coming morning to let anyone rest easily, and I end up outside near the greenhouse instead, the same spot I sat with the fragment weeks ago. Except this time May finds me there before I've been alone for more than a few minutes. She sits down without asking, close enough that our shoulders almost touch, and for a while neither of us says anything at all. Just the low hum of the water wheel somewhere behind us and the greenhouse glass catching what little moonlight makes it through the clouds. I used to think this whole thing was ridiculous, she says eventually. The lean-to, the shalish, all of it. I thought we'd be rescued in a week and I could forget any of it happened. And now? She's quiet for a moment, turning something over before she says it. Now I don't know what I'd do if we were rescued tomorrow. This is, she gestures loosely, the house, the greenhouse, the whole small world we've built out of driftwood and iron and a voice in my head. This is real. More real than most of what I had before the ship went down. That's not nothing, I say. It's not just the house. She looks at me directly this time. None of the sharpness she used to wear like armor in the first weeks. None of the performance either. I watched you dive back into a sinking ship for people you'd never met. I watched you turn down a man with a wall twice the size of ours because doing the right thing mattered more to you than being safe. Her voice catches slightly. I've never known anyone who actually meant the things they said the way you do. I don't know what to say to that, so for a moment I just let the quiet sit between us, the kind of quiet that doesn't need filling. Tomorrow's going to be dangerous, she says finally, softer now. I just wanted you to know that, whatever happens, I'm glad it was you who pulled me out of that cabin. I'm glad it's been you, this whole time. She doesn't wait for an answer. She just leans her head against my shoulder, and I let her. And for a long stretch of quiet, neither of us moves. The greenhouse glass reflecting faint moonlight. The water wheel turning steady in the dark. The whole strange, built, impossible little world we've made together holding still around us for one night before everything changes again. Somewhere behind us, through the lit window, Era's laugh carries faintly. Some joke with Sarah, easy and unguarded in a way that would have seemed impossible for either of them the day they met. Yuna's silhouette moves past the greenhouse, checking the seedlings one last time before turning in. Steady and certain in a way the girl curled against a cabin wall on the first night could never have imagined becoming. I think about a puddle evaporating on a beach, 10 points of nothing against a world that outweighed it 100 times over. I think about how far a puddle can travel, given enough time and the right reasons to keep building. Whatever happens tomorrow, I say quietly, to May, to the dark, to all of it, we're not the same four people who washed up here. We're not ending this the way we started it. May doesn't lift her head, but I feel her smile against my shoulder all the same. No, she says, we're really not. We moved before dawn. The six of us who can actually fight. Myself, Era with her arms still stiff but steady enough to trust. May with a forged blade she's practiced with more than anyone realized. Tamsin, Pell guiding from memory, and Sarah staying just behind the line with medicine ready rather than a weapon. Yuna stays back at the house with the boy, both of them armed, both of them under strict instructions to use the perimeter's remaining defenses only if everything else has already gone wrong. The walk to Crane's camp takes most of the pre-dawn hours. Pell leading us along a route that avoids the main approach his own scouts would expect. Cutting instead through terrain he swears is watched less carefully because it's harder to cross. It's harder. My legs are burning by the time the palisade wall comes into view through the thinning trees. Gray light just starting to touch the sky behind it. There, Pell whispers, pointing to a section of the wall where the timber's older, weathered, a gap near the base where runoffs worn a channel underneath just wide enough to matter. Blind spot. Nobody patrols this stretch closely, and they never expected anyone to come at them instead of the other way around. The plan holds for the first stretch of it, clean and quiet, exactly the way Era laid it out 3 nights ago. Tamsin and I slip through the gap first, May right behind, moving low along the inside of the wall toward the position Pell marked as the most likely place to find Crane himself at this hour. A raised platform near the center of camp that serves as both lookout and command post. The smoke bombs go off on schedule at the camp's eastern edge. Thick gray clouds rolling up fast from packed charcoal and the workshop's chemical mixture, drawing shouts and confused movement away from where we actually need people looking. It's not chaos exactly, it's controlled disruption. Exactly the kind of thing that buys us minutes instead of hours. Minutes we need to reach Crane before his camp fully wakes to what's happening. For a moment, it looks like it might actually work exactly as planned. Then a guard rounds the platform's base early, spots May before she's fully in cover, and shouts a warning that unravels the quiet the whole raid depended on. What follows isn't the battle from the assault on our own fence line. Smaller, faster, closer quarters. Fewer people on either side because Crane's numbers were already thin before tonight, and half of what's left breaks for the smoke and confusion rather than toward the fight. Pell was right about that much. Most of the camp doesn't want this fight at all, and given an obvious way out that doesn't involve dying for a man they've stopped believing in, they take it. The ones who don't run are the hardcore, the loyal, the desperate, the ones with nowhere else to go. And they fight harder than the men who broke on our fence line weeks ago, because they don't have the option of simply running that everyone else just took. I catch sight of Crane himself on the platform, already moving, already understanding faster than anyone else in his camp exactly what's happening and who's responsible. He doesn't panic. Whatever else is true about him, he's not a man who panics easily, and that composure is exactly what makes him dangerous now that his back is against the wall in the most literal sense. By the time I fight my way up onto the platform, Era and Tamsin covering the stairs behind me, Crane's not alone anymore. He's got a hand fisted in Sarah's. No, not Sarah's, someone else's. A young woman from his own camp caught trying to flee toward the smoke, dragged back and held now with a blade at her throat. Close enough that the threat isn't performance. That's far enough, Crane says, voice level despite everything, despite the smoke and the shouting and the platform stairs behind me still ringing with the sound of a fight not yet finished. You come in here into my own camp and you think this ends the way you planned it. Let her go, I say. You first invaded. Don't lecture me about who's doing what to whom. Something raw finally breaks through the composure, thin and dangerous. I built this. Every wall, every rule, every person who's alive right now because I made the calls that kept us that way. And you... His grip tightens on the girl, who whimpers. You walk in with your workshop and your water wheel, and you think you get to just erase all of it. I think fast. Faster than I've had to think since the vine trap on the first night, and I don't reach for a weapon at all. You're right, I say instead. You built this. All of it. And right now, everyone who's still loyal to you is watching you hold a blade to the throat of one of your own people because you're losing. Something flickers across his face. The same disbelief I saw at the tree line weeks ago. The same crack. Except this time, there's an audience for it. The handful of his remaining loyal fighters still on the platform stairs, close enough to see exactly what their leader looks like, with his back fully against the wall. You called it survival, I continue, keeping my voice level, keeping his attention entirely on me instead of the blade drifting a fraction looser in his grip as his focus splits. Everyone finds their place, you said. This is what that actually looks like, isn't it? A knife against someone who never chose any of this. Don't, he warns. But there's less certainty in it than there was a second ago. Behind him, I catch Tamsin's eye. She's read the same shift I have, and she's already moving, silent, along the platform's edge where Crane's attention isn't. It happens fast once it happens. Tamsin closes the distance while Crane's still focused on me, on the words, on the fracture spreading visibly through his own composure in front of the very people whose loyalty he spent the whole fight trying to hold. She doesn't go for a killing blow. She doesn't need to. A hard strike to the wrist, precise, and the blade drops before it can do what he threatened. The young woman scrambling free the second his grip loosens. Crane turns on Tamsin with real fury then, the mask finally completely gone, and it's Era who reaches him first, forged blade catching his forearm before he can close the distance. Enough to make him stagger back rather than press forward. He's cornered now, genuinely cornered, platform's edge behind him, no hostage left to leverage, his own remaining fighters on the stairs, watching all of it unfold with expressions that have shifted from fear of him to something closer to simple exhaustion. It's over, I say. Look around. Nobody's fighting for you anymore. They're just watching to see what happens next. He actually looks, at the handful of fighters on the stairs who've stopped advancing, at the smoke still rising from the eastern edge where most of his camp fled rather than defend him, at Era and Tamsin flanking him with weapons he can't get past. For a long moment, nothing happens at all. Then something in him just gives. The fight going out of his shoulders all at once. The man who walked into our treeline meeting with total, unhurried confidence finally. Completely out of moves. Fine, he says, low, bitter, fine, we don't kill him. I decide that before anyone has the chance to ask, before the adrenaline of the fight has fully drained out of any of us, because killing him here, now, in front of people who've spent months learning to fear him, doesn't end anything cleanly. It just makes us the next person on this platform holding power through violence instead of the last. He's bound instead, disarmed, and the fighting elsewhere in the camp winds down within minutes of word spreading that Crane's been taken. Most of the remaining resistance simply stops. Weapons lowered, exhausted rather than defeated in any way that requires more force to finish. It's Pell who finally says what several people are clearly thinking, standing near the platform steps once the worst of it's over. What happens to him now? I look at Crane, bound and silent, all that careful composure finally, permanently cracked. He doesn't get to lead anything again. Not here, not anywhere near either camp. Beyond that, I look to the others, to Era and Tamsin and Sarah arriving now with the rest. That's not only my call to make. Too many people here have their own reasons to weigh in on what he's owed. The decision that follows, once the camp's fully secured and the sun's properly up, isn't vengeance and isn't mercy exactly either. Exile, stripped of any authority, escorted to the far side of the island with what supplies can reasonably be spared, and a clear understanding that returning means forfeiting whatever goodwill kept him alive today at all. It's not a clean ending. It's not meant to be. It's the ending that lets everyone else here actually move forward instead of carrying the weight of what killing him in cold blood, even after everything, would have meant for the people trying to build something better than what he built. What's left of Crane's camp, the frightened, the exhausted, the ones who never wanted any of this, watches all of it unfold with an expression I recognize now, because I've seen it before on Pell's face, on Sarah's, on Tamsin's the night she first stood at our perimeter with her hands raised. The specific look of people who've been told for months that kindness was a trick, a weakness, a thing that gets exploited the second you show it. Watching that story fail to be true right in front of them. "You're not going to punish everyone who followed him," one of the older men says, not quite a question, watching me with the same wary hope Pell wore in his first days with us. "No," I say. "Following him because you were scared isn't the same as being him. If you want to come with us, you're welcome. If you'd rather stay here and rebuild this place your own way, that's yours to choose too. Nobody's deciding your place for you anymore." I say it partly because it's true, and partly because Crane's own words are still sitting in my chest from the tree line weeks ago. Everyone finds their place, and there's no better way to prove exactly how wrong that sentence was than to hand people the choice he never gave them. Several choose to stay, rebuilding what's left of the camp under whatever leadership they sort out for themselves once we've helped clear out anything that reminds them too directly of who ran it before. More choose to come with us, adding to a settlement that started as 4 strangers and a shalash and has become, somehow, in less than 2 months, something large enough to actually need the word. The walk back to our own house that evening is slower than the walk out this morning, weighted with exhaustion and the particular quiet that follows something that had to be done rather than something anyone wanted to do. Ira walks beside me, arm still bandaged but steady, watching the small column of former camp members trailing behind us with an expression somewhere between wariness and something warmer. She hasn't quite let herself feel yet. "We just took in an entire camp," she says. "That's not the same as the trip lines and the greenhouse. That's a real settlement now. Yeah, are you ready for that?" I look ahead, toward where the water wheel will come into view once we clear the last stretch of trees. Toward Yuna and the boy waiting somewhere in the lit windows of a house that started as sticks and driftwood on a beach that nearly killed all 4 of us. "I don't know," I say honestly, "but I know what happens if we let fear of getting it wrong turn us into exactly the kind of place we just walked away from." Ira doesn't answer that directly. She just falls into step a little closer, and behind us the column of people who spent months believing kindness was a trap keeps walking, toward a house with real light in the windows, toward whatever this all becomes next. 6 weeks after Crane's camp becomes part of ours instead of a threat looming past the tree line, I stand on the ridge above the settlement in the early evening light, and for a long moment I just look at what 4 strangers and a voice in my head managed to build out of a shipwreck. It doesn't look like survival anymore. It hasn't looked like survival for a while now, if I'm honest with myself, but standing here with actual distance between me and the daily work of it, the shape of the whole thing finally settles into focus the way it hasn't had room to before. There's the original house, expanded twice now, its rooms warm with lamplight strung along a wire grid that draws power from a water wheel that's been rebuilt twice over and improved each time. The greenhouse Yuna designed has multiplied into 3, glass panels replacing the oiled cloth now that the silicon deposit's been properly worked. The forge that started with a single rough bloom of iron has grown into a working smithy with 2 furnaces, turning out tools sharp and clean instead of ugly and barely functional. Beyond it, new structures built from the timber and stone of Crane's old palisade, repurposed rather than wasted, housing for the people who chose to stay. A proper medical building that Sarah runs like she was born to it. A schoolhouse of sorts where the boy, no longer flinching at every loud noise, spends his mornings learning to read from whatever books survived the wreck. Smoke rises from a dozen chimneys instead of one thin trail. Voices carry up from the settlement below. Ordinary sounds, someone laughing, someone calling a child in for dinner, the rhythmic clang of Ira's hammer at the forge. Still working an evening shift out of habit more than necessity now that there are other hands trained well enough to share the load. The old fragment from the beach sits on a shelf in the house now, no longer a mystery I carry in my pocket wondering about. That answer came 3 weeks ago, when an expedition Era and Tamsin led further inland than anyone's gone before, finally uncovered what the workshop had been quietly pointing toward since that first night on the sand. Ruins. Old. Weathered down past recognition by centuries rather than years. Buried under jungle growth so thick it took real effort to even confirm they were structures and not natural formations. Carved stone, worked metal fused and corroded, and at the center of it all, something that made the workshop pulse with recognition strong enough that I felt it before Era even called out that she'd found something. A chamber, mostly collapsed, its walls lined with the same deliberate markings as the fragment I found that first morning. The workshop showed me, in pieces over several days of careful excavation, what those markings actually meant. Not a warning, not a threat, but a record. A civilization that existed here long before any of us, one that built systems like the workshop itself, meant to help small groups of survivors rebuild after disasters too large to simply wait out. Whoever they were, they'd faced something that scattered or ended them centuries ago and left behind, buried and patient. Exactly the kind of tool that found its way into my head the night our ship went down. It's not an ending that opens onto more danger. It's not a hint of some larger threat still waiting in the dark. It's simply an explanation, finally, of why any of this was possible at all. A piece of the past closing rather than a door to the future creaking open. The workshop doesn't hint at more tiers beyond what I've already reached, doesn't flag some greater purpose still unfulfilled. It just quiets, settled, complete, the way a book settles once you've reached the final page. Whatever built it is long gone. What's left is only what we've made of the gift it left behind. Ira finds me on the ridge as the light starts properly fading, climbing up without needing to ask where I'd gone. The same easy certainty she's carried since the first night she started building a fire without waiting for anyone's permission. "You disappeared," she says, settling beside me, her arm fully healed now, not even a hint of stiffness left in it. Needed the view. She looks out over the settlement with me for a while, quiet, and I think about the person who stumbled out of a sinking ship 2 years into an engineering degree she never got to finish, and who's since become, without ever asking for the title, the person half the settlement turns to whenever something needs building or fixing or understanding. "Chief Engineer," I say, half to myself. "What? That's what people have started calling you." "Did you know that?" She laughs, surprised, a little embarrassed. "I heard. I didn't think it would actually stick. It's earned. Every bit of it." She doesn't argue, which from her is its own kind of acceptance. And for a while we just sit together watching lamplight flicker on below us. The two smithy furnaces still glowing faintly even at this distance. May finds us not long after, climbing the ridge with less patience than Ira showed, settling on my other side without asking either. She's changed more than almost anyone since that first night on the beach. The sharp defensive edges worn down into something steadier. The girl who once demanded a room with a window, now the one who spends her mornings helping Sarah organize medical supplies without anyone having to ask twice. "They're setting up for dinner down there," she says. "You're supposed to be at the head of the table. Apparently that's a rule now, whether you like it or not." "Since when?" "Since about a month ago." "You just hadn't noticed because you're always the last one to notice things about yourself." I take her hand without thinking too hard about it, the way I've been doing more and more since that night before the raid, and she laces her fingers through mine like it's the easiest thing in the world. Like the two of us settled into something neither of us needed to announce because it announced itself instead. Slowly. Over months of building a life together out of nothing more complicated than choosing to keep showing up. "I used to think," she says quietly, "that being rescued would mean going back to who I was before. Now I think I'd rather stay exactly who I've become." "You don't have to choose," I say. "This is real, whether a ship ever finds us or not." She leans her head against my shoulder, same as the night before the raid, and this time there's no fear underneath it, just the quiet certainty of someone who's stopped waiting for the ground to shift again. Yuna's waiting at the base of the ridge when the three of us finally climb down, a lantern in one hand. The boy trailing behind her, clutching a book he's clearly been practicing reading from all afternoon. She's not the girl who curled against a cabin wall on the first night anymore. Hasn't been for a long time now. Steady, purposeful. The greenhouse is her domain in a way that's given her something none of us could have handed her directly. A place that's entirely, unmistakably hers, built from grief turned patiently into growth. "Dinner's ready," she says. "Sarah made everyone wait for you specifically. Something about it not counting as a proper meal without the person who built the table." "I didn't build the table," I say. "Ira and I built the table." "Chief Engineer," Ira says, deadpan, and May laughs, and even Yuna's mouth twitches toward a smile she doesn't fully let show. The settlement's dinner table, long now, built to seat far more than the four of us who first shared a fire on this beach, is full by the time we reach it. Sarah at one end, still fussing over the boy's plate despite his protest that he's old enough to serve himself. Tamsin beside Pell, the two of them deep in some argument about crop rotation that's clearly more affectionate than it sounds. Former members of Crane's camp scattered among the rest, indistinguishable now from anyone else at the table, laughing at something someone said, passing food without hesitation. None of the careful wariness that marked their first weeks here. I take the seat May insists is mine, Ira on one side, May on the other, Yuna and the boy settling in across from us, and for a moment before the noise of the meal fully swallows the quiet, I just look at all of it. The lamplight, the food grown in Yuna's greenhouses, the tools forged in Era's smithy, the people who found their way here scared and left that fear behind somewhere in the months of building alongside the rest of us. I think about a puddle evaporating on a stretch of desert sand, 10 points of nothing against a world too large to survive. I think about a boy who dove back into a sinking ship instead of running, and a shalash that shouldn't have held through a storm but did, and a workshop that never once handed me anything I didn't have to build myself, piece by piece, choice by choice. The island that was supposed to be the end of everything became instead exactly the opposite. Someone raises a cup further down the table, a small, ordinary toast to nothing in particular, just the simple fact of another meal shared together, and the whole table lifts something in answer. Laughter rolling easy around the wood I built with my own 2 hands. I don't have a speech for this moment, I don't need one. The lamplight, the full table, the people who chose to stay and the people who chose to come, all of it says everything that needs saying, plainer and truer than any words I could put to it. We survived the ship. We survived the island. Somewhere along the way, without any of us quite noticing the exact moment it happened, we stopped merely surviving at all and started simply to live. That's the whole of it. That's enough.